September 29th, 1913, the English Channel. A steamship called the SS Dresden cuts through black water under a moonless sky. Most passengers have retired to their cabins. The ship rocks gently. The engines hum. Everything is ordinary. Everything is quiet. And somewhere on that ship, one of the most consequential men who ever lived is taking his last steps. His name is Rudolf Diesel. He is 55 years old. He is the man who changed the way the world moves. He invented an engine so efficient, so powerful, so fundamentally disruptive that entire industries built their fortunes around it. He had dinner with two colleagues that night. A pleasant meal, relaxed conversation, nothing unusual. Around 10 o'clock, he told them good night, went to his cabin, and asked to be woken at 6:15 the following morning. His colleagues said good night, the door closed, and Rudolf Diesel was never seen alive again. When the steward knocked the next morning, there was no answer. When they opened the cabin, the bed was unslept in. His hat and overcoat were neatly folded and placed on the deck rail as if someone had carefully set them down. There was no note, no explanation, no body, nothing but open water and unanswered questions that would haunt history. So here is the question that has never been fully answered. Did Rudolf Diesel jump, or was he pushed? To understand why this question matters, you have to understand the world Rudolf Diesel was born into and what he dared to threaten. The year is the late 1800s. The world runs on coal and steam. Every factory, every locomotive, every ship is powered by steam engines. These engines were loud, wasteful, dangerous, and enormously profitable for the people who controlled the fuel that feeds them. The industrial world was a machine designed to burn things, and the men who owned the coal mines and oil wells were among the most powerful. Rudolf Diesel looked at that world and decided it was inefficient. Not in a casual, theoretical way, in a deep, obsessive way. He had grown up in poverty, the child of German immigrants in Paris, and had been sent away at 12 for a proper education. He was brilliant, lonely, driven, and certain that the world's energy problem had a better solution than the one currently being sold. He began working on his idea in the 1880s, an engine that would compress air so intensely it would spontaneously ignite fuel. No spark plugs, no steam boiler, no enormous quantities of coal, just compression, combustion, and mechanical power at an efficiency rate that the steam engine could never come close to matching. In 1892, he filed the patent. In 1897, working with man in Augsburg, Germany, he built a working prototype. It was a genuine miracle of mechanical engineering. The diesel engine converted roughly 26% of its fuel into usable energy, compared to just 10% for the best steam engines of the era. It was quieter, more reliable, easier to maintain, and capable of running on almost any combustible liquid. And here is the detail that made powerful people very, very nervous. Rudolf Diesel specifically designed his engine to run on vegetable oil, peanut oil, plant-based fuel that any farmer could grow, without needing a single oil well, a single coal mine, or a single multinational energy company standing between the engine and its fuel. At the 1900 World Exhibition in Paris, Diesel demonstrated his engine running entirely on peanut oil, and told the audience that his invention would free ordinary people from dependence on fossil fuels forever. Think about what that meant to the men who owned the fossil fuels. For a few extraordinary years, Rudolf Diesel was celebrated as a genius and rewarded like one. The money came in extraordinary quantities. Licensing deals made him wealthy beyond anything his childhood poverty could have imagined. He built a magnificent villa in Munich. He traveled. He entertained. He became a figure of genuine international prestige. The kind of inventor whose name would outlive him by centuries. Who knew it, and who carried that knowledge with quiet pride. But wealth has a way of becoming complicated for people who don't fully understand it. and Rudolf Diesel did not fully understand it. He was an engineer, not a financier. He made catastrophic investment decisions. He sank enormous sums into ventures that failed. He trusted people he should not have trusted. And by the early 1910s, the fortune that his genius had built was draining away faster. By 1913, the man who had once been worth millions was secretly, desperately, catastrophically broke. He owed money he could not repay. He had borrowed against assets that no longer existed, and he had told almost no one. This is the context in which Rudolf Diesel boarded the SS Dresden on September 29, 1913. A business trip, on the surface routine. But before he left, he did something strange. He handed his wife a bag and told her not to open it until he returned. Inside, she would later discover, was approximately 200,000 marks in cash, everything that remained of their fortune. He also asked his son to manage some personal affairs. The people who saw him described him as distant, hollow-eyed, not quite present. One associate later said he looked like a man who had already made a decision. Nobody asked what kind of decision. 10 days after the Dresden docked in Harwich, a Dutch pilot boat called the Koertzen was working the waters of the English Channel, when the crew spotted a body floating in the sea. They recovered it, noted the condition, badly decomposed, clearly in the water for over a week, and after examining the personal effects found on the body, returned the items to the water out of standard maritime practice. The items were later recovered and brought to Diesel's son, who identified them with certainty. All his. The body was Rudolf Diesel. The cause of death was listed as drowning. Everything else was listed as unknown, and that word unknown is where the mystery lives. There are 3 serious theories about what happened on the deck of the SS Dresden that night, and each is more disturbing than the last. The first theory begins with the peanut oil speech in Paris and never really ends. Rudolf Diesel built an engine that could run without petroleum, at a time when the global oil industry was just beginning to understand the scale of its own power, when men like John D. Rockefeller were constructing fortunes. The existence of a viable, mass-producible engine that didn't need their product was an existential threat. Diesel was not quiet about his vision. He wrote publicly about the potential of vegetable oil-powered engines to liberate communities. He made the argument directly and loudly that his engine was designed to break the monopoly of fossil fuel. The oil industry had every reason to want him gone. Whether they had the capability and the will to make that happen on a steamship in the middle of the Channel in 1913 is impossible to prove, but impossible to dismiss. The second theory comes from the governments of Europe rather than its corporations. By September 1913, the First World War was less than a year away. The military planners of Europe absolutely knew it. And Rudolf Diesel's engine was not just a commercial technology by 1913, it was a military one. The German Navy had become convinced that diesel-powered submarines were going to be decisive weapons in the coming conflict. The diesel submarine could travel further, dive deeper, and operate more quietly than any steam-powered vessel. Diesel had been involved in discussions about his technology's military applications, and his trip to London raised serious alarms. Was Rudolf Diesel about to sell German military secrets to the British? Was he planning to defect? Did German intelligence decide a dead inventor was safer? This theory has never been proven. It has also never been adequately refuted. The third theory is the quietest and in some ways the most heartbreaking. Rudolf Diesel was broke, humiliated, exhausted, and out of options. The bag of money he left for his wife was essentially a farewell gift, a final act of provision from a man who had decided he would no longer be there. The hollow look in his eyes, the strange behavior before departure, the meticulous way his coat and hat were folded and placed. These are not the actions of a man who fell. they may be the actions of a man who chose. The personal collapse theory requires no conspiracy and no assassin. It requires only a brilliant man crushed under the weight of his own failures, deciding on a dark night in the middle of the channel that the water was a better answer than the morning. Rudolf Diesel vanished from the world on September 30th, 1913. His engine did not vanish with him. Within decades of his death, the diesel engine was powering cargo ships, freight trains, military vehicles, buses, generators, and agricultural machinery. This Second World War was fought, in significant part, by diesel-powered machines. The global supply chains run almost entirely on diesel engines. Every truck that delivers food to your city, every container ship that crosses the ocean with the products you buy, every piece of construction equipment that builds the roads you drive on. Rudolf Diesel's name is stamped invisibly on every one of them. He never saw any of it. He died, or was killed, before his invention became the literal engine of modern civilization. And the world that runs on his genius has never agreed on how he left it. There is something almost unbearable about that. A man who spent his entire life trying to give the world a better way to move through itself, and who disappeared without a trace into the very water that his engines would eventually cross billions of times. He is a ghost in the machines, a name without a grave, an answer that the ocean swallowed and never gave back. So here's the question, and it is a real one, not a rhetorical one. Given everything you now know, what do you think happened? Was Rudolf Diesel a broken man who made a final desperate choice? Or was he a threat that someone decided was too dangerous to reach London? The evidence points in every direction. The truth points nowhere. And the engines keep running.